Have you ever been laughed at, not because of what you
I
did,
don't care
but
what you
because of
think
who
of
you
me.
were?
I
When
know
a
who I
proud
am,
billionaire mocked
and
a
I don't
humble
work here
maid, he
anymore.
never imagined that the woman he humiliated would one day make the whole world remember her name. What happened next shocked everyone in that golden hall. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me from which country and at what time are you watching this story? The room was full of money, perfume, and laughter until a billionaire pointed at a cleaning lady and turned her into the evening's entertainment. Inside the grand ballroom of the Driscoll Hotel in downtown Austin, crystal chandeliers scattered gold light across the marble floor. Waiters moved like shadows among guests, dressed in silver and champagne hues. A jazz trio played something slow and expensive. It was the Southern Charity Fashion Gala, the kind of night where people measured success by the height of their heels and the sparkle of their smiles. Naomi Bennett kept to the edges of that light, pushing her cleaning cart toward the corner where a waiter had spilled wine. The soft squeak of her shoes was swallowed by the hum of conversation. Her gray uniform hung loosely on her narrow shoulders. Her hands were small, rough from bleach and detergent. Still, she carried herself with quiet grace, eyes lowered but alert, as if she were listening to a language no one else could hear. Across the hall, Elias Darrow, the man whose name was carved into half the oil rigs of Texas, lifted a glass of champagne. His laugh was smooth and practiced, the kind that made people lean in to catch it. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, gesturing toward the stage, "take a good look at that beauty." Suspended under a spotlight, the red dress shimmered like a flame trapped in silk. The announcer had just declared its value $900,000, a one-of-a-kind Beaumont creation. Elias smiled wider. "Tell you what," he said, voice carrying easily over the music, "if anyone in this room can fit into that dress tonight, I'll marry her on the spot." Ripples of laughter ran through the crowd. Someone called, "Even you, Elias?" Another shouted back, "He means it." Phones lifted to capture the moment. Elias's eyes drifted, searching for a target, and landed on Naomi. She froze where she stood, the mop handle still in her hand. He pointed straight at her. "There's our brave contender," he said, loud enough for the band to falter. "What do you say, sweetheart? You up for it?" The laughter sharpened. Naomi's cheeks burned. She looked down, saw her reflection warped on the polished floor. For a heartbeat, she thought of her mother's sewing machine back in their small apartment, of the calloused hands that once mended torn fabric with patience and pride. Then the sound of someone's camera shutter snapped her back. Elias turned toward his friends, basking in their amusement. "If she fits, I'll keep my word," he declared. "Let's draw up a contract right here." More laughter. Naomi gripped the cart so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her throat ached with the effort not to cry. The chandeliers seemed too bright, every sparkle a reminder of where she didn't belong. Slowly, she pushed the cart toward the service door. Each wheel squeaked like a heartbeat, counting her shame. Behind her, someone whistled. Another voice teased, "Don't run away, honey. 30 days." The laughter swelled again. She reached the hallway and let the heavy door close behind her. The sound of celebration muffled instantly, replaced by the low hum of the hotel's machinery. For a long moment, Naomi stood against the cold wall, breathing hard. Then she slid down to the floor, tears slipping past her fingers. It wasn't the first insult she'd endured, but it landed deeper, maybe because it echoed something she'd once feared was true, that dreams had no place in the hands of people like her. But as the echo of laughter faded, something else rose in its place. Anger, determination, a quiet promise forming beneath her ribs like a steady drumbeat. Naomi stayed there on the cold tile floor for what felt like forever, the smell of cleaning, solvent, mixing with the faint sweetness of spilled champagne. A muffled cheer came from behind the door. Someone was making a toast. Another round of laughter. It sounded far away now, like an old memory she didn't want to keep. When she finally stood, her legs were trembling. She wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve, leaving faint streaks of mascara. Her reflection in the stainless steel elevator door startled her. The woman staring back wasn't broken. She was simply waiting. She straightened her uniform and whispered, "You'll see." Back in the supply room, she packed her things with slow precision, the same care she once used when cutting fabric patterns at design school. Those days came rushing back. The smell of cotton, the hum of sewing machines, The way she used to dream of designing dresses that made women feel seen, not mocked. 6 years ago, she had been a scholarship student at Parsons School of Design, top of her class, until life demanded a cruel trade. Her mother's stroke had left her half paralyzed, and hospital bills didn't wait for graduation. Naomi left school, traded sketchbooks for mops, and silence became her classroom. She told herself she'd go back someday, but someday kept moving further away until tonight. She clocked out just before midnight, slipping through the back exit into the cool Austin air. The city lights shimmered off rain puddles on 6th Street, and a bus rolled by carrying people half asleep. She walked the 6 blocks home, passing diners still open for the late crowd. Neon signs flickering break fast all day. The world was the same as it had been every night before, yet everything inside her had shifted. At her apartment building, the night manager nodded from his chair. "Evenin', Miss Bennett," he said kindly. "Evening, Carl," she replied, voice steady now. The elevator groaned as it climbed to the 4th floor. Inside her small apartment, the clock on the wall ticked loudly. Her mother, Mary, was asleep on the pull-out couch, the soft hiss of her breathing filling the room. Naomi knelt beside her, brushed a stray gray hair from her forehead, and whispered, "It's okay, Mama. I've got us." She sat at the kitchen table and opened her old laptop. The keys were worn, the screen flickering slightly. She typed 3 words into the search bar. Elias Darrow scandals. Page after page appeared charity events, business deals, glossy magazine covers. But buried deeper, she found something else. Labor complaints, rumors, quiet settlements, names of women who had once worked for him. She bookmarked every link, her heartbeat steady now. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere over the hills. Faint but growing. She didn't know what she was planning. Not yet. Only that she wouldn't stay silent anymore. The next morning, before dawn, Naomi stood in front of the small mirror above the sink. Her eyes were swollen, but her gaze was calm. She tied her hair back, laced up her worn sneakers, and whispered the words that would become her vow. 30 days. She didn't mean 30 days to fit into a dress. She meant 30 days to remember who she was before the world told her otherwise. At 5 a.m., she stepped outside. The air smelled of wet pavement and promise. Street lights glowed dimly as she walked past the bakery that opened early for commuters. A man on a bicycle nodded as he passed, and for the first time in years, Naomi smiled back. Somewhere in that quiet moment, between night and dawn, a small spark of courage caught fire. It didn't roar or flare. It simply burned, patient and sure. The city was waking up, unaware that a woman who had been invisible yesterday had just decided to change everything. And when she looked up at the pale Texas sky, streaked with the first hint of morning pink, Naomi knew one thing for certain. When she returned to that ballroom, she would not come as the help. She would come as the storm. Morning came early in Austin. A pale light touched the rooftops, and the air smelled faintly of rain and gasoline. Naomi Bennett walked down South Congress Avenue with a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. It was 5:30 in the morning, the city half asleep, coffee shops still blinking their open signs into life. She stopped in front of a narrow brick building, squeezed between a tire shop and a laundromat. A faded sign above the door read, "South Congress Gym Train Hard, Stay Kind." Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of sweat and old rubber mats. Dumbbells clanked. Music hummed low from a dusty radio playing Willie Nelson. A woman in her 40s, broad-shouldered and sharp-eyed, looked up from wiping down a punching bag. "You lost, sweetheart?" she asked, her accent pure Texas. "No, ma'am," Naomi said. "I'm here to work out." The woman raised an eyebrow. "You picked a tough hour for it. Name's Rita Coleman. I own the place. What's your goal?" Naomi hesitated, her voice small but steady. 30 days. I need to fit into a size 4 dress." Rita gave a short laugh. "Now that's specific. You got a reason?" "Someone bet I couldn't." That made Rita pause. She studied Naomi's posture, the dark circles under her eyes, the tremor in her hands. "And what happens if you win?" Naomi met her gaze. "Then I'll never let anyone laugh at me again." Something softened in Rita's expression. She tossed a towel onto a nearby bench. "All right then, you follow my rules. No excuses, no skipping days. You show up every morning even when it hurts. Deal?" "Deal." Rita extended a hand, and Naomi shook it firmly. For the first time in a long while, she felt the weight of her shame begin to shift, small, almost invisible, but real. They started that morning with the basics: stretches, squats, jump rope. The gym was nearly empty, only the hum of ceiling fans and the rhythmic slap of rope against the floor. Naomi's body protested every move. Years of exhaustion had drained her strength, but something deeper kept her going. Each breath became a promise. Each drop of sweat, an unspoken reply to Elias Darrow's laughter. After an hour, Rita handed her a paper cup of water. "You got fire," she said. "But fire burns out fast if you don't feed it right. What's your name again?" "Naomi Bennett." "Well, Miss Bennett, I'm gonna make sure that fella who mocked you eats his words." Naomi smiled weakly. "He already started." They shared a brief laugh, small, honest, the kind that warms more than it hurts. Rita scribbled a schedule on a notepad. 5 a.m. Workouts. No sugar. No excuses. Naomi folded the paper like it was a contract signed with her own resolve. Later that morning, she walked back home past the Guero's Taco Bar, the smell of fresh tortillas curling into the cool air. She stopped long enough to buy a black coffee from the corner cafe, tipping the sleepy barista $1. The world looked different now, still rough, still heavy, but it finally felt like it was hers to carry. When she reached her apartment, her mother was awake, sitting by the window. Mary looked at her daughter's flushed face and smiled faintly. "Morning workout?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Naomi said, catching her breath. "It's just the first day." Her mother nodded, eyes soft with pride and worry. "Don't forget to rest your heart while you work your muscles, honey." Naomi kissed her forehead. "I'll be careful." Then she went to her small table, opened her notebook, and wrote a single line at the top of the page. "Day you know start again. No fear." By the end of that first week, Naomi could barely lift her arms. The 5 a.m. sessions became a rhythm her body both dreaded and craved. Each dawn began the same way: the squeak of her sneakers on the rubber floor, the click of Rita turning up the radio, the faint smell of disinfectant and iron. Outside, the sky grew lighter minute by minute, as if the sun itself were cheering her on. Some mornings, Rita talked while Naomi caught her breath between sets. "I used to box," Rita said once, wrapping her hands with tape. "Got my jaw cracked in Houston back in '02. Everyone said I was done. But sometimes losing a fight ain't the end. It's the start of learning how to stand again." Naomi smiled through her exhaustion. "Then maybe I'm just learning to stand." "Exactly," Rita said, tightening the gloves on her wrists. "Standing's harder than swinging, trust me." Their conversation stitched together a quiet friendship. Between sweat and laughter, Naomi started to open up about design school, her mother's illness, the years she'd spent invisible to the world. Rita never pitied her. She only nodded and said, "Then you already know what real strength looks like." But strength, Naomi discovered, was never a straight climb. On the 13th morning, her body finally rebelled. Halfway through a set of lunges, the room tilted, her knees buckled, and darkness rushed in like a wave. When she woke, she was lying on a bench, a wet towel over her forehead. Rita knelt beside her, fanning her gently with a folded magazine. "Easy now, you just overdid it." Naomi blinked, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" Rita cut her off. "Hush, sweetheart. You don't owe me an apology. You've been carrying more than weights." "Oh?" Naomi's eyes filled before she could stop them. I can't go back to being nothing." Rita's voice softened. "You're not nothing. You're rebuilding. There's a difference." She squeezed Naomi's hand. "You're not proving him wrong. You're proving yourself right." Something about that sentence settled deep in Naomi's chest. The gym's neon sign buzzed faintly overhead, and she could almost feel her heartbeat sinking with its flicker, steady, stubborn, alive. That evening, after her mother fell asleep, Naomi sat again at the small kitchen table with her laptop. The glow from the screen painted her face pale blue. She opened the folder she'd created days earlier, labeled Darrow. She read article after article until the words blurred together. Business awards, charity galas, family foundations. It was all polished marble and white teeth. But then she clicked a smaller link at the bottom of a local news page. Former assistant files harassment complaint. Case settled. The article was brief, almost hidden. No photos, just text, confidential settlement, undisclosed terms. The assistant's name was Gabriela Ruiz. Naomi leaned back in her chair, whispering the name under her breath. Gabby. She opened another tab and searched again. A LinkedIn profile. Inactive. A blog entry from years ago, one line stood out like a spark in the dark. The hardest part about silence is pretending it's peace. She read the line twice, then a third time, until it etched itself into her thoughts. Someone else had been humiliated and silenced, maybe more than one. And maybe, just maybe, those people were waiting for someone to speak first. Naomi closed the laptop softly, afraid the click might wake her mother. She sat there for a long while. The hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the room. Outside, a police siren wailed faintly and faded away. She reached for her notebook, the one where she'd written, Day 1 start again, no fear. Beneath it, she added a new line, Day 13. Fall, stand, keep moving. The next morning, Naomi walked into the gym, slower, but stronger. Rita smiled when she saw her. Didn't think you'd quit, she said, handing over a towel. Can't afford to, Naomi replied. For a while, they trained in silence, the steady rhythm of motion filling the space. The radio played an old tune, Patsy Cline, singing Crazy Soft and cracked with nostalgia. Naomi felt the sweat run down her back, felt her muscles scream. But inside her chest, something steadier was growing. Not anger, not pride, but purpose. She wasn't chasing a dress anymore. She was chasing a voice. When the session ended, Rita clapped her shoulder. That's it for today, champ. You keep showing up like this, and that man's gonna wish he never opened his mouth. Naomi smiled faintly. He already does, Rita chuckled. I like you more every day. That night, after dinner, Naomi logged back into her laptop and clicked on Gabi Ruiz's old blog again. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, uncertain. Then she began to type a message short, careful, and true. You don't know me, but I believe you. I was humiliated by Elias Darrow at the Gala. I'm not looking for pity, I'm looking for truth. If you're willing to talk, I'll listen. She stared at the message before pressing send, her heart hammering. The screen stayed silent for a long minute. Then, with a soft ping, a reply appeared. You're the woman from the video, aren't you? Naomi froze. She hadn't known there was a video. The next line made her breath catch. It went viral, 2 million views. Most of the comments are on your side. Call me. Naomi leaned back, stunned. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. Outside, thunder rolled again over Austin. It sounded almost like applause. The next morning, Naomi sat in her favorite corner booth at Magnolia Diner, a modest place with red vinyl seats and a neon sign that had been flickering since the 90s. The bell above the door jingled each time a customer came in, letting in the crisp scent of autumn. Pancakes sizzled on the grill, and the smell of coffee hung thick in the air. It was the kind of diner where truckers and teachers shared space, where no one cared about your clothes, only if you left a decent tip. Naomi had ordered a cup of black coffee she barely touched. Her heart beat faster each time the door opened. On her phone, the message from the night before glowed softly. Meet me where the coffee tastes burnt. That line had led her here. At exactly 9 o'clock, a woman walked in tall, dark hair, pulled into a tight bun, coat buttoned neatly to the collar. Her eyes were cautious, intelligent, the eyes of someone who had learned to study a room before sitting down. She spotted Naomi instantly and crossed the diner with quiet confidence. Naomi Bennett. Naomi nodded, rising halfway. You must be Gabriela Ruiz. Call me Gabi. Her handshake was firm, her tone practical. You look different than I expected. Different how? Naomi asked. Stronger, Gabi said simply, then gestured for them to sit. The waitress arrived, a woman with curly hair and a kind smile. Y'all want refills? Yes, please, Naomi said. And maybe 2 slices of pie? Apple or pecan? Pecan, Gabi answered. Texas rules. The waitress laughed and walked away. For a moment, the 2 women sat in silence, the clink of dishes filling the gap. I saw the video, Gabi said finally. The one from the Gala. Naomi's stomach tightened. I didn't know it existed until last night. It's everywhere, Gabi said softly. 2 million views. But most of the comments, they're not mocking you. People are furious at him. They call you brave. Naomi looked down at her coffee. Brave isn't the word I'd use. I just didn't want to cry in front of them. That's bravery too, Gabby replied. Her voice gentled. You remind me of myself before I stopped believing things could change. Naomi glanced up. Your lawsuit, the one they buried? Gabby's jaw tightened. I filed it 3 years ago. Darrow's lawyers made sure it never saw daylight. They offered me a payout and a non-disclosure agreement. I took it. I had bills, a sick father. But silence doesn't feel like peace. It feels like a slow kind of dying. Naomi nodded, understanding more than she wanted to. You said in your message you might know others. I do. Gabby reached into her purse and pulled out a folded paper napkin. Written on it in careful handwriting was a name, Troy Wallace. Who is he? Darrow's driver for 8 years. He got fired 2 months ago, saw something he wasn't supposed to. If anyone knows where the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking, it's him. Naomi unfolded the napkin and read the small scrawl beneath the name Galveston Marina. A gust of wind rattled the diner window. Naomi traced the words with her finger, the ink slightly smudged. You trust him? I trust his anger, Gabby said. Sometimes that's enough to start with. The waitress returned with their pie and refilled their mugs. The scent of sugar and butter filled the booth. Gabby stirred her coffee slowly, watching the steam rise. You really think you can take him down? She asked quietly. Naomi looked out the window, where sunlight was breaking through thin clouds, glinting off parked cars. I don't know about taking him down, she said, but I'm done letting men like him decide who I am. For the first time, Gabby smiled a small, weary smile that looked like it hadn't visited her face in years. Then you're already winning. Naomi reached for her wallet to pay, but Gabby stopped her hand. I've got it. Consider it an investment in justice. They stood and buttoned their coats. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the faint sound of church bells from a few blocks away. Naomi tucked the napkin carefully into her pocket. I'll find him. Be careful, Gabby said. Men like Darrow, they don't lose gently. Naomi nodded. Neither do women who have nothing left to lose. The highway stretched south for miles, a silver ribbon beneath a sky the color of tin. Naomi's old sedan hummed steadily, its air vents wheezing warm air against her chilled fingers. She had the napkin with Troy Wallace's name folded in the cup holder, and every few miles she glanced at it as though it might suddenly whisper directions of its own. The drive from Austin to Galveston took nearly 4 hours. She passed cotton fields, long stretches of pasture, and the occasional roadside stand selling pecans. Country music faded in and out on the radio. Somewhere near Houston, rain began to fall soft at first, then harder, blurring the outlines of the world. When she finally reached the coast, the air changed. It smelled of salt and diesel, of fish and rust. The Galveston Marina was quieter than she'd expected. A row of docks, gulls circling above, boats bobbing gently in their slips. A few men were repairing nets, their laughter rough but kind. Naomi tightened her coat and followed the wooden walkway until she saw an older man sitting at the end of the pier, feeding crackers to the seagulls. Troy Wallace? She asked. He didn't look up at first. Who's asking? My name's Naomi Bennett. Gabby Ruiz sent me. That made him turn. His face was lined, weathered from sun and years of driving other people's roads. He studied her for a moment, then gestured to the bench beside him. Sit. The gulls get nervous when strangers stand. Naomi Saturday. The sea slapped gently against the dock below. I heard about you, Troy said. You're the girl from that video, the cleaning lady. Naomi swallowed the sting of the words. That's me. Thought so. He tossed another cracker. You've got guts coming here alone. Most folks wouldn't. I'm not most folks, Naomi said quietly. That drew a faint smile from him. No, I reckon you're not. He leaned back, gaze fixed on the horizon. 8 years I drove for that man. Learned more about him from the rearview mirror than most ever will. Why'd he fire you? Naomi asked. Because my daughter worked for him. His voice roughened. She was 23. He made her life hell. When she refused him, he ruined her. Said she stole from the company. She ain't found work since. Naomi's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Troy shook his head. Don't be. Sorry won't fix what he broke. But truth might. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small rusted keychain shaped like a horseshoe. You see this? It's the spare key to his lawyer's penthouse in Houston. Man keeps everything there. Files, backups, paper trails. I never went in, but I know the key fits. Naomi took the keychain, feeling its weight. Why give it to me? Because I'm tired, he said simply. And because you still got fire in you. Maybe you'll do something with it before it burns out. A gust of wind lifted her hair. If you help me, you might be in danger. He chuckled softly. Darling, danger's been my shadow a long time. Let's just say I'd rather face it standing next to someone who knows why they're fighting. They sat in silence for a while. The gulls screamed overhead, and the sky began to darken toward evening. Naomi could taste salt on her lips, maybe from the sea, maybe from tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. Finally, she stood. Thank you, Mr. Wallace. Troy, he corrected gently. And you be careful, Miss Bennett. Men like him, they don't lose gently. I'll remember that, she said. As Naomi walked back along the dock, her steps echoed hollow on the wood. The marina lights flickered on, one by one, glowing pale against the dusk. When she reached her car, she slid behind the wheel, clutching the keychain in her palm until it pressed a small mark into her skin. The engine coughed to life. She pulled out of the lot, heading toward the highway. In the rearview mirror, the marina receded a cluster of golden dots swallowed by distance. But a mile down the road, she noticed headlights appearing behind her, a dark sedan that matched her speed, staying close even when she changed lanes. Her grip on the steering wheel tightened. She slowed slightly. The car slowed too. She turned onto a smaller road that curved past a Whataburger and an old gas station. The sedan followed. Her heart pounded. She forced herself to stay calm, repeating Rita's voice in her head. Stand. Don't swing. At the next intersection, she took a sharp left, then another. The sedan paused, then continued straight, disappearing into the night. Naomi exhaled, shaking. She pulled over under a streetlight and sat there for a long moment, her breath fogging the windshield. On the passenger seat, the napkin from Gabi's diner was damp from her raincoat. The ink had begun to fade, the words Galveston Marina barely visible now, as if the sea itself was erasing her trail. She unfolded it carefully, and with trembling fingers wrote beneath the fading line, "Truth lives longer than fear." Then she started the engine again and drove toward Austin, headlights cutting through the rain, the keychain glinting faintly in the dashboard light. The Gulf air clung to Naomi's skin as she stepped out of her car near the marina once more. It was late afternoon, and the sun had slipped behind a curtain of clouds, painting the water in muted shades of silver. The gulls screamed overhead like impatient witnesses. She could still hear Rita's voice in her head. Storms clean the air. Naomi spotted Troy Wallace again, this time standing beside an old pickup truck near the pier. He was stacking boxes in the back, slow and deliberate. His gray windbreaker flapped against the wind. "I didn't expect you back," he said when she approached. "I couldn't leave things half done," Naomi replied. "You said you know what's inside that penthouse. I need to hear it." Troy gave a weary sigh, wiping his hands on a rag. "You sure you want to dig that deep, girl? Sometimes truth ain't freedom, it's a weight you gotta carry." "I can carry it," Naomi said quietly. He studied her face, then nodded toward a small bench overlooking the water. "Sit then. Might as well do this right." The bench creaked as they Saturday. A freighter horn sounded in the distance. "For 8 years I drove Darrow everywhere," Troy began. "Boardrooms, charity events, family parties that weren't really family. He talked when he drank, and he drank plenty. Told stories he thought were funny about deals, about women, about how everyone had a price. I didn't say much, just kept my eyes on the road." He paused, reaching into his coat pocket for a cigarette. He didn't light it, only rolled it between his fingers. One night, maybe 6 months ago, he got a call. Some woman threatening to go public about him. I saw him panic, real panic for the first time. He told his lawyer to lock everything up, said he wanted copies of every payment, every message. The next day, I drove a briefcase to his lawyer's apartment in Houston. I know what was in it: files, flash drives, photos, proof. "Proof of what?" Naomi asked. "Of what he did to people. Women, mostly. Folks he blackmailed, even his business partners. That briefcase is his insurance and his curse." Naomi shivered. The wind had grown colder, carrying the faint smell of diesel from the docks. Troy leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "My daughter Layla, she worked for him in accounting. Smart girl. Too smart. She found out about his fake charities money moving to offshore accounts. When she confronted him, he fired her and told folks she'd been stealing. She hasn't been the same since. Depression, doctor visits, the whole 9 yards. I kept quiet because I thought keeping my job meant keeping her safe. That was my mistake. Naomi's voice softened. You were trying to protect her. He shook his head. I was protecting myself from feeling powerless. There's a difference. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the gulls and the gentle creak of ropes against wooden posts. Naomi stared at the water calm on the surface, but she knew the current ran strong underneath. Troy finally said, The lawyer's name is Philip Rhodes. Lives in a high-rise off Main Street in Houston. He's out of town this weekend. Keeps a spare key in a drawer at his office. But the penthouse has its own lock. That keychain I gave you, it opens the safe inside. Naomi nodded slowly, gripping the horseshoe keychain in her pocket. You're risking a lot telling me this. He smiled faintly. At my age, risk and regret start to sound the same. End of 2. For the first time since she met him, Naomi noticed a framed photo sitting on the dashboard of his truck. A young woman in graduation robes, beaming at the camera. That's your daughter? Yeah, Troy said softly. Layla. She used to say one day she'd work for people who respected her. I used to believe her. Naomi looked at the picture again. Maybe she still will. Maybe we all will. Troy laughed quietly, a sound full of both pain and relief. You sound like someone who ain't done fighting. I'm not, Naomi said. The waves slapped softly against the dock below, a sound like an old clock ticking. Naomi let it steady her heartbeat. She could feel the air, changing the storm that had threatened all afternoon, beginning to gather strength beyond the horizon. Troy pulled the cigarette from between his fingers and tossed it into the water. You want to know something funny? He said, voice low. When I first met Darrow, I thought he was a good man. He talked about building schools, funding hospitals. Then I realized he didn't care about any of that. He just liked hearing his name on people's lips. Naomi listened in silence. The truth didn't shock her. It only confirmed what she already felt. He stood and stretched his back. I don't know what you plan to do with that key, but if you use it right, it might finally take him down. Just remember, folks like him always think they're untouchable until someone proves otherwise. I'll be careful, Naomi said. Good, Troy replied, because he's got eyes everywhere. I've seen men disappear from his payroll like they never existed. You keep that head of yours clear, and you don't tell nobody who doesn't need to know. She nodded, slipping the keychain into the pocket of her coat. The metal was cold against her skin. Thank you, she said softly. He gave her a long look, the kind older men give when they see someone fighting the battles they lost years ago. You remind me of Layla, he murmured. Same fire, just don't let it burn you down, too. Naomi smiled faintly. I'll try not to. When she returned to her car, the clouds had thickened, turning the marina gray. She sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, watching Troy's reflection in the rearview mirror as he walked back toward his truck. The man carried his guilt the way others carried a coat worn, familiar, and heavy. The drive back toward the highway was slow. The rain started as a whisper against the windshield, then built into a steady rhythm. Naomi kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting over the keychain. As she neared the freeway entrance, her phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen from an unknown number. Stop digging, Miss Bennett. Some things are buried for a reason. Her fingers tightened around the phone. She looked at the rearview mirror. No cars behind her this time. Only the empty road slick with rain. But the message pulsed on the screen, its glow cold and thin. Naomi deleted it without replying. Then she turned off the phone altogether. By the time she reached Austin, the storm had passed, leaving the streets shining under the streetlights. She parked near her apartment, the horseshoe keychain still glinting faintly in her palm. Inside, her mother was asleep on the couch, a blanket tucked beneath her chin. The television flickered on mute, an old movie playing two dancers spinning across a ballroom floor. Naomi stood watching for a moment, her eyes catching on the woman's red dress on the screen. Something about it made her breath catch the same color, the same shimmer that had mocked her weeks ago. But now it looked different, not cruel, not unreachable, just fabric and thread. something she could recreate with her own hands. She turned off the TV and sat quietly beside her mother, the sound of the clock ticking softly in the background. Her thoughts drifted to Rita and Gabby, strong women who, like her, had carried their bruises in silence until they became armor. She wondered how many others were out there, still waiting for permission to fight back. In the soft light of the room, Naomi opened her notebook again. The pages smelled faintly of coffee from the diner. She flipped past day 13 and wrote, "Day 21, truth is heavier than shame, but it builds stronger hands." Her pen lingered on the last word, hands. She looked down at hers, calloused, tired, but steady. She thought of the files Troy had described, hidden behind polished doors in a Houston penthouse, of all the names buried in that safe, of her own reflection that night in the hotel hallway, staring at a woman she had almost stopped believing in. Naomi closed the notebook. The decision was already made. Tomorrow, she would talk to Gabi and Rita. They would need a plan, one that didn't just expose Elias Darrow, but protected the women he had hurt. She would use what she had, her patience, her discipline, her eye for detail. The same things that once made her a designer would now make her something else, a builder of justice. Outside, the night was still. The storm clouds had drifted east, leaving behind a faint trace of lightning far off over the Gulf. Naomi whispered to herself, "Let it rain again if it must. I'm ready." And in that quiet kitchen, with the hum of the refrigerator and her mother's slow breathing filling the air, it felt like a prayer, one that asked not for ease, but for courage. Rain tapped lightly against the window of Naomi's apartment as dawn crept over Austin. The city was wrapped in that stillness that comes right after a storm, streets glistening, leaves shining wet under the street lamps. Inside, the smell of coffee filled the small kitchen, mingling with the faint scent of lavender from her mother's hand cream. Naomi sat at the table, hair still damp from a quick shower, staring at the horseshoe keychain on the counter. Its metal caught the morning light, throwing a thin reflection onto the wall. She turned it over and over in her hands, feeling the weight of what it meant. Her mother, Mary Bennett, shuffled into the kitchen in her robe and slippers, leaning slightly on her cane. "You're up early again," she said, her voice warm but tired. "Couldn't sleep," Naomi replied. "Big day." Mary poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from her. "You've had a lot of big days lately." Naomi smiled faintly. "This one's different." Mary studied her daughter for a moment, then reached across the table, resting a wrinkled hand over Naomi's. "You've been fighting the world so long, honey. Just remember, winning isn't always about striking back. Sometimes it's about standing tall and staying kind." Naomi felt her throat tighten. "I'll try to remember that." Mary squeezed her hand once more before letting go. "You always do." Later that morning, the rain stopped, and Naomi drove to the gym. Rita was already there, taping her wrists and humming along to the old radio. The moment she saw Naomi, she turned down the volume. "You look like someone who hasn't slept in a week," Rita said. "Maybe 2, Naomi answered. Rita chuckled. "Well, whatever you're planning, make sure you eat something first. Revolutions don't run on empty stomachs." Naomi smiled at the familiar tone. Then she reached into her bag and placed the keychain on the bench between them. Rita looked at it, eyebrows raised. "I'm guessing that's not for a new apartment," she said. "No, it's for a door in Houston, a lawyer's safe." Rita whistled low. "You sure you want to open it?" "I don't think I have a choice," Naomi said. "There are women he hurt, files that prove it. Gabi and I can't let them disappear again." Rita leaned against the wall, folding her arms. "You'll need more than anger to pull that off. You'll need precision." Naomi nodded. "I was a designer once. Precision's the only thing I never lost." That made Rita grin. "Then I guess it's time you start designing justice." "Oh." They spent the rest of the workout in near silence, each lost in thought. When it was over, Rita handed her a towel and said, "Whatever happens, you remember storms clean the air." "I know," Naomi said softly. "You've told me before. That's because it's true." By afternoon, Naomi met Gabi Ruiz at a small cafe across from the university. Students passed outside, their laughter echoing down the sidewalk. Inside, the air smelled of espresso and wet coats. Gabi had her laptop open, a dozen tabs glowing across the screen. "I've been digging," Gabi said without looking up. "The lawyer's name is Philip Rhodes, just like Troy said. He's out of town until Sunday for a conference in Dallas. His security system's good, but not top tier. If we go Saturday night, we'll have a 3-hour window before the cleaning crew arrives." Naomi listened, calm and deliberate.
What about evidence extraction?
"I'll handle that. I've got a friend who can clone a drive in 20 minutes. We'll take what we need, leave the rest. No one gets hurt." Naomi reached across the table, touching Gabi's wrist gently. "You sure you want to be part of this?" Gabi met her gaze. "Naomi, this isn't just your fight. He took pieces of all of us. It's time we take something back." They sat there for a long moment, the rain starting again outside, tapping softly against the windows. Naomi felt the tension in her chest begin to settle, not gone, but manageable, like a seam finally holding after too many loose stitches. When she drove home that evening, the city was wrapped in golden light. The clouds had thinned, and the sunset spilled across the skyline like melted amber. She rolled down her window and let the wind rush in, carrying the faint smell of barbecue and rain. At a red light, she glanced at the rearview mirror. For the first time in weeks, her reflection didn't look like someone running away. It looked like someone coming home to herself. Night fell over Austin like a slow curtain. The streets glowed orange under the lamplight, rainwater still glistening in the gutters. Naomi drove home from her meeting with Gabi, her mind buzzing with details, maps, timelines, passwords, exit routes, but beneath it all was something quieter, a deep, steady calm she hadn't felt in years. At a stoplight, she rolled down her window and let the humid air brush her face. Somewhere nearby, a radio played an old country song about second chances. The lyrics floated through the drizzle. "You can't fix yesterday, but you can start again tonight." Naomi smiled faintly. She didn't believe in signs, but that line lingered, like a gentle reminder. When she pulled into her building's parking lot, the light in her mother's window was still on. Inside, Mary Bennett sat on the couch, knitting, the soft click of the needles filling the room. "You're late," her mother said without looking up. "I was with Gabi." Mary nodded slowly, her eyes still on the yarn. "You're chasing something again, aren't you?" Naomi hesitated, removing her coat. "Maybe I am. But this time, I'm not alone." Mary set her knitting down. "That's good, honey. Just make sure what you're chasing doesn't turn into what you're running from." "Oh," Naomi smiled, walking over to kiss her mother's forehead. "You always know the right thing to say." Her mother chuckled. "That's what old age is for collecting lines for the right moments." They sat together for a while, sipping tea in silence. The television murmured faintly in the background, a news anchor talking about rising oil prices and corporate scandals. Naomi wondered if Darrow's name would appear there someday, not as a symbol of power, but as a warning. When her mother went to bed, Naomi stayed up, spreading papers and photos across the table, screenshots of articles, notes from Gabi, sketches of floor plans drawn in pencil. She was meticulous, methodical, the way she used to be when designing garments. Every detail mattered. Every seam had to hold. At midnight, her phone buzzed. A message from Rita. "You've got a good heart, kid. Just don't let it get broken in the crossfire." Naomi smiled softly, typing back only 2 words. "Not this time." She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. She remembered the way Troy had looked at her, half proud, half afraid. The way Gabi's hands trembled slightly when she talked about the plan, and her mother's words, always circling back to forgiveness, even in the face of injustice. Justice and forgiveness. 2 threads that never quite wove together neatly, yet somehow belonged in the same cloth. The next morning, Naomi woke early and drove to the diner where Gabi worked. The sun had barely risen, and the neon sign flickered faintly against the pale sky. Inside, the smell of coffee and cinnamon filled the air. "You're early," Gabi said, wiping down the counter. "I couldn't sleep," Naomi admitted. "Too much to think about." Gabi poured 2 cups of coffee and slid one toward her. "Then let's talk it through." They went over everything: Troy's directions, the timing, how to retrieve the evidence without being detected. Each step was written down twice. Once on paper, and once in Naomi's mind. When they finished, Gabi said, "We're doing this for more than revenge, right?" Naomi looked at her, eyes steady.
We're doing it because the truth shouldn't be locked behind anyone's door.
Gabi smiled. "Good. Then let's make sure we walk through that door with purpose."
Oh?
That evening, Naomi returned home to pack a small overnight bag. The horseshoe keychain went into the side pocket, along with her phone, gloves, and an old Polaroid of her mother smiling in front of their first apartment, a reminder of where she came from and what she was protecting. Before leaving, she paused in the doorway of her mother's room. Mary was asleep, the lamp still on, her hand resting lightly over her chest. Naomi whispered, "I'll make you proud, Mom." The drive to Houston was long and quiet. The highway stretched endlessly under a sky that shifted from blue to indigo to black. She passed small towns and gas stations, each one a reminder of the ordinary lives untouched by the cruelty she was about to confront. Halfway there, she pulled into a rest stop, stepping out to stretch her legs. The night air smelled of pine and rain-soaked asphalt. She looked up. The stars were faint, hidden behind drifting clouds. Naomi took out her notebook and wrote by the glow of the dashboard light, Day 23. The truth doesn't shout, it waits. Then she tore out the page, folded it neatly, and tucked it inside her pocket. When she got back into the car, her reflection in the rearview mirror caught her eye. She no longer saw the cleaning lady who had been laughed at in a hotel ballroom. She saw a woman who had rebuilt herself thread by thread, choice by choice. As she started the engine, the rain began again, soft, cleansing, rhythmic. By the time she reached the outskirts of Houston, the streets were slick and empty. Naomi parked under a flickering streetlight, looking up at the towering glass building that housed Rhodes's penthouse. Her pulse steadied. She checked her watch. 2 days left until the gala. 2 days until everything changed. She whispered into the quiet car, "This isn't about revenge. It's about release." And with that, she stepped out into the rain, her shadow merging with the city's glow, a small figure moving toward something vast, uncertain, and necessary. The sky over Houston was the color of steel, the kind that promises rain but never quite delivers it. Naomi parked 2 blocks from the Rhodes Tower, a gleaming high-rise of glass and arrogance, standing like a monument to everything she had learned to despise. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, hair tied neatly under a cap, dark jacket zipped to her chin. No jewelry, no perfume, nothing traceable. The horseshoe keychain hung from her wrist like a quiet promise. Across the passenger seat, Gabi Ruiz closed her laptop and exhaled. "All right. Security rotates every 40 minutes. Cameras on the 32nd floor loop every 12. We've got a window between 10:45 and 11:15. You ready?" Naomi nodded. "Ready." Gabi gave her a small grin. "Then let's get what we came for." They slipped into the building through a side door marked Maintenance Access, following a map Troy had drawn from memory. The hallways smelled faintly of bleach and cold air conditioning, the kind that hums like an indifferent machine. Inside the elevator, Naomi's pulse synced with the quiet whir of the cables. Each floor number blinked upward like a heartbeat. When the doors opened on floor 32, they stepped out into a marble corridor lined with silent doors. Philip Rhodes's office was at the end of the hall, tall mahogany doors with frosted glass panels. Gabi worked quickly, pulling a small device from her backpack. The lock clicked open after a few seconds, quiet as a sigh. Inside, the office smelled of old money and ambition. Polished wood, leather, the faint trace of whiskey. Naomi moved to the desk, careful not to disturb the framed family photos, a smiling wife, 2 children in baseball uniforms. "Where's the drawer?" she whispered. Gabi pointed. "Bottom left." Naomi knelt and slid it open. Inside lay a small black velvet pouch. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled it out. The horseshoe keychain fit perfectly into the tiny lock on the pouch's metal case. The click echoed louder than she expected. Inside was a single brass key, elegant, old-fashioned, heavier than it looked. On its handle was engraved a small symbol. A falcon. Gabi frowned. "That's it?" Naomi nodded. "The safe key." They replaced everything exactly as they'd found it. Every movement felt deliberate, sacred, as if disturbing the order of things might wake the ghosts sleeping inside these walls. As they prepared to leave, Naomi's gaze caught something half hidden beneath a stack of folders on the desk, a silver flash drive. Its label read, "Donations Q4." She hesitated. "We shouldn't take anything else." "But if it's evidence," Gabi began, "then we'll copy it." Naomi slid the drive into her pocket. We don't steal. We borrow the truth. They left the office as quietly as they'd entered. The hallway felt colder now. In the elevator, Naomi stared at the key in her palm, the falcon engraving glinting faintly under the fluorescent light. What's the falcon mean? Gabby asked. Naomi thought for a moment. Power, vision, freedom. Gabby nodded. Then maybe it's time that symbol changed sides. When they reached the lobby, Naomi tucked the keychain deep into her pocket. The night air outside felt damp and electric. Across the street, the faint neon of a diner flickered. For a moment, the smell of coffee and fried dough carried her back to Austin, to Gabby's laughter, her mother's knitting needles, Rita's voice at the gym. Those ordinary things were what she was fighting for, not vengeance, not fame, just the quiet dignity of a life lived without fear. They drove away in silence, the city lights trailing behind them like ribbons of gold. Halfway to the motel where they planned to rest, Naomi's phone buzzed again. This time, no words, only a photo. It was her mother, sitting on their porch. The caption read, "You're not the only one who knows how to knock on doors." Naomi's blood ran cold. She pulled the car over, heart hammering. "Gabby," she said, showing her the phone. Gabby's face paled. "Oh my God! Who sent that?" Naomi's mind raced. The street in the photo was dark, the porch light faint, but it was clearly taken from close range. Whoever sent it had been there. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. "We need to get back to Austin. Now." Gabby nodded, already grabbing her bag. Naomi started the car, her breath shaky but her resolve solidifying with every mile. Whoever thought they could frighten her had made one mistake. They'd reminded her what she was fighting for. And nothing, not even fear, could make her turn back now. The highway blurred beneath Naomi's headlights as she and Gabby sped away from Houston. The brass key lay between them, its falcon engraving catching stray flashes of streetlight. Neither spoke. The silence carried its own weight. They reached a motel just outside the city. Gabby opened her laptop, checking the copied files. "There's enough here to bury him," she whispered. "Emails, transfers, even photos. We did it." Naomi nodded, but her mind wasn't celebrating. Something gnawed at her, a sense that the night wasn't done with them yet. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One image. Her mother, Mary, sitting on their porch, the picture taken from across the street. The caption read, "You're not the only one with a key." The air left Naomi's lungs. Gabby leaned over her shoulder, whispering, "He knows." Naomi stood abruptly. "We're going back. Now." They drove through the night, rain streaking across the windshield like veins of silver. Naomi's hands gripped the wheel until her knuckles whitened. Gabby tried to call Troy, but there was no answer. When they reached Austin, dawn was breaking pale and pink over the rooftops. Naomi's building stood quiet, too quiet. She parked, heart pounding, and ran up the steps. Inside, the door was unlocked. The living room lamp still glowed, and her mother sat calmly on the couch, knitting. "Mom?" Naomi gasped. Mary looked up, smiling softly. "A man came by. Said he was an old friend. I didn't open the door." Naomi rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside her. "You're okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," her mother said gently. "But you look like you've seen a ghost." Naomi took her hand, trembling. "I might have." Just then, headlights flashed outside. A car idled across the street, engine humming low. Naomi moved to the window and saw a figure in a suit behind the wheel, face shadowed, watching. Gabby's voice came from behind her. "He's not going to stop, is he?" Naomi shook her head slowly. "No, but neither will we. I'm free." She drew the curtains closed, the light filtering into soft gold. Behind her, her mother reached out, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You always were the brave one," Mary murmured. Naomi smiled faintly, the keychain glinting in her palm. Brave, or just too tired to be afraid anymore. Outside, the car pulled away into the morning mist. Inside, Naomi finally exhaled, her decision clear as sunrise. This fight was no longer just about exposing a man's corruption. It was about protecting every woman he tried to silence. And this time, she wasn't alone. The Austin Grand Hotel shimmered beneath chandeliers, laughter floating over the clink of glasses. The annual charity gala Elias Darrow's playground was in full swing. Naomi stood across the street, the evening wind brushing against her midnight blue dress, one she'd designed herself. Every stitch was defiance, every fold redemption. In her clutch, the brass key rested quietly, her final truth. Beside her, Gabi Ruiz adjusted the earpiece. Security rotates every 40 minutes. You'll have 3 minutes once we start the upload. Ready? Naomi nodded. Ready. They entered unnoticed through the side door. The ballroom smelled of lilies, expensive perfume, and pride. At the far end, Elias Darrow laughed too loudly among his guests, his perfect mask still intact. Naomi moved through the crowd, calm, invisible, until she reached the stage where the famous red dress gleamed under the lights. That dress, the one once used to humiliate her, now stood like a relic of who she used to be. She pressed the remote in her clutch. The ballroom screen flickered. At first, guests assumed it was part of the presentation. Then Darrow's voice filled the hall. If she doesn't accept the offer, destroy her reputation. I don't care how. Silence. Then gasps. Phones rose. Whispers spread like wildfire. Elias froze, color draining from his face. "Turn that off," he shouted, but no one moved. On screen, more evidence appeared: emails, bribes, settlements, the quiet machinery of cruelty finally exposed. Naomi stepped forward into the light. Her voice was steady, almost gentle. "You told me I didn't belong in this room. Maybe you were right, because this room was built on silence." Darrow tried to approach her, but flashes blinded him. Reporters shouted his name. Someone yelled, "Police!" and uniformed officers entered the hall. Gabi's voice came through Naomi's earpiece, low but triumphant. "It's done. Every outlet has it." The applause began slowly, uncertain, then grew not for spectacle, but for courage. Darrow was led away, his cufflinks catching the last gleam of light before disappearing behind the closing doors. Naomi turned to the display, her reflection mirrored in the red dress's glass. "It was never about the dress," she whispered. "It was about dignity." Outside, the air was cool, soft with the scent of rain. Gabi joined her, trembling with adrenaline. "You did it," she said. Naomi smiled faintly. "We did it, and for the first time, I'm not afraid." Across the street, news vans lit up the night. Inside, reporters repeated her name, calling her the woman who stood up to power. Naomi didn't listen. She just looked up the sky, breaking open to reveal a few quiet stars. She took Gabi's hand. "Let's go home. My mother's waiting." As they walked away from the glittering hotel, Naomi didn't feel vengeance, only peace. Justice wasn't loud. It was the calm after the storm, the quiet heartbeat of something mended. And in that moment, she finally understood. She hadn't come to destroy a man. She had come to rebuild what he'd broken in herself and in others. The morning light crept through Naomi's kitchen window, soft and golden, touching everything it met: the chipped mug, the small vase of daisies, the quiet photograph of her and her mother smiling on a park bench. It was over. Elias Darrow's arrest filled every news channel, his empire unraveling overnight. But Naomi didn't turn on the TV. The noise of victory belonged to others. What she wanted now was silence. Her mother, Mary Bennett, was already awake, stirring oatmeal on the stove. When she saw Naomi, she smiled that calm, knowing smile only mothers have. "You look lighter," she said. Naomi sat at the table, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. "Maybe because I finally put something down." Mary nodded, placing a bowl in front of her. "Justice can be heavy until you let it rest." They ate in quiet comfort, the morning air filled with the scent of cinnamon and the sound of birds outside. After a while, Mary reached across the table and squeezed her daughter's hand. "I saw the news," she said softly. "You didn't just stand up for yourself, Naomi. You stood up for everyone who couldn't." Naomi's eyes glistened.
"I just wanted to stop being afraid."
"And you did," Mary whispered. "That's how courage begins in fear." Later that afternoon, Gabi and Rita stopped by with flowers and laughter that filled the apartment like sunlight. Troy sent a postcard from Galveston, written in careful block letters. "Told you truth lives longer than fear. Proud of you, kid." They all sat together in the living room, drinking coffee and talking about nothing: urgent favorite movies, recipes, silly memories. It felt ordinary, and that, Naomi realized, was the real miracle. When the guests left, and the apartment grew quiet again, Naomi went to her sewing table. On it lay a new piece of fabric, pale blue satin, soft as morning light. She threaded her needle and began to stitch, slow and patient. Every loop, every pull of thread was a memory, the tears, the humiliation, the gym at dawn, Gabby's diner, the red dress under the glass. Each one now transformed into something new, something beautiful. On the corner of the table sat the brass key. Naomi picked it up, turning it over one last time before slipping it into a small box labeled Lessons. Then she closed the lid gently. Outside, the sky was bright and clear. She took her finished sketch and pinned it to the wall, a dress design simple yet radiant, with a caption written beneath in her careful handwriting. The Grace Collection, dedicated to women who refuse to disappear. Evening came quietly. Naomi and her mother sat on the porch, watching children play in the street and neighbors watering their gardens. The world felt slower, safer. Mary leaned against her daughter's shoulder. "You remember when you were little? You used to tell me you'd make clothes that made people feel brave." Naomi smiled. "Maybe that's still the plan." Her mother chuckled softly. "Then I'd say you already did." They sat until the sky turned violet and the first stars appeared. Naomi looked up, her heart steady, her hands finally still. "I used to think justice meant revenge," she said quietly. "Now I know it means peace." Mary squeezed her hand. "And peace," she said, "is what you were sowing all along." The night deepened. Somewhere, a wind chime sang in the distance. Naomi closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't running from the past. She was walking toward her future. And this time, she wasn't alone. Sometimes, healing doesn't arrive in the form of applause or grand gestures. It comes quietly, like the morning after a long storm, when sunlight touches a coffee cup, or when a mother and daughter share oatmeal in the kitchen without needing many words. Naomi's story wasn't about revenge or fame. It was about the slow, patient mending of a soul that refused to stay broken. In a world where cruelty once defined her, she chose compassion. Where humiliation once silenced her, she found her voice again steady, calm, and full of purpose. And in doing so, she reminded all of us that strength isn't loud or cruel. It's soft, consistent, and full of love. Her victory wasn't measured in headlines or money, but in peace, the kind that settles deep in the heart after you finally forgive the world for what it tried to take from you. Like many of us, she learned that justice can exist alongside mercy, and that forgiveness, when it finally comes, feels like a clean breeze through an open window. Leçon. Unconditional kindness can change the course of a life. Everyone deserves love and a second chance to build their own home, not a house of wealth, but a home of dignity, understanding, and peace. True happiness begins when we live for others, not above them. It's a lesson we see in the small things, a Sunday supper shared with neighbors, a hand reaching across a divide, or a quiet, "I'm proud of you," whispered after years of silence. These are the ordinary moments that hold extraordinary grace. Because in the end, love and decency outlast everything else. Power fades, names are forgotten. But kindness leaves a light that keeps burning long after we're gone, just like a porch light left on for someone finding their way home. One small act of goodness can guide us through the darkest roads of life. So tonight, as you sit back with your cup of tea, think of the people who once helped you stand when you had no strength left. And if this story touched your heart, press 1" the comments. If you'd like to share your thoughts or tell us how it made you feel, press 0. And let's talk about it together. Because stories like this aren't meant to end, they're meant to remind us that every thread of kindness we sow into the world becomes part of someone else's healing.